At a luxury party, a millionaire turns his face towards a girl. In a firm voice, the disabled child calls out to him, "Sir!" He tries to ignore it until he hears something that makes him freeze. "My mother has a ring, just like the one you wear." If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. A light rain fell over the capital that June night, soaking the streets and sidewalks of the city center. Clara Jensen adjusted the torn blanket over her shoulders, trying to protect her faded backpack from the humidity that insisted on infiltrating every corner. At 16, she already knew every alley and awning that could serve as shelter, every establishment that usually donated leftover food at the end of the day, every person who from time to time gave her a smile or a few coins. Limping slightly on her left leg, Clara approached one of the trash cans near the luxurious Continental Hotel where a charity event was taking place, the golden lights escaping through the huge windows contrasted with the darkness of the street, creating a spectacle of shadows on the wet asphalt. The teenager stopped for a moment, mesmerized by the coming and going of the elegantly dressed people who could be seen through the glass. As Clara rummaged through the trash can for anything salvageable, she kept a sharp eye out for movement. That was when a silvery reflection caught her attention. Through the window, she saw a tall man in an impeccable dark suit, gesturing as he spoke. On his finger, a silver ring glinted under the lights of the room. Clara's heart instantly raced. Her hands trembled, and she had to hold onto the wall to keep from falling. That ring was identical to the one her mother had described in the note she had left years ago. "Look for the man with the silver ring. He will know who you are." The words, so carefully stored in her memory, echoed in her mind like a drum. Clara quickly opened her backpack, taking out a worn notebook where she kept her poems and, among its pages, a yellowed photograph of her mother, a woman with a warm smile and a flowery dress. With trembling hands, she also took out a white handkerchief embroidered with the initials ER, one of the only reminders she had of her origins. She looked back at the man in the room, who was now talking to a group of businessmen. There was something familiar about his face, as if she had seen him somewhere before, perhaps in her dreams or in the stories her mother used to tell her. Clara knew this might be her only chance. Years of searching, of cold nights under makeshift awnings and cardboard boxes might finally make sense. With determination, she packed up her belongings and looked around, looking for a way to enter the event. Her eyes fell on an abandoned broomstick near the service entrance. With creativity born of necessity, she improvised a cane that would help her move around more easily. She watched the movement of the staff, and when a group of waiters hurried in through the side door of the kitchen, Clara followed them, limping discreetly. Her simple appearance contrasted sharply with the luxurious surroundings, but years of living on the streets had taught her to become almost invisible when necessary. In the main hall, the buzz of conversation and the clinking of glasses created a perfect sound curtain for her approach. The man with the ring was now near one of the drinks tables alone, checking something on his cell phone. Clara took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she could find. After all, what did she have to lose? She approached slowly, feeling her heart beat so hard it seemed to want to escape her chest. The man ignored her completely, as if she were just another shadow on the wall. Clara noticed 2 security guards approaching, probably already alerted to her inappropriate presence. It was now or never. "Sir," she said, with a firmness that surprised even herself, "my mother has a ring just like yours." Time seemed to freeze. The man slowly looked up from his phone, and when his gaze met Clara's face, something inexplicable happened. His expression changed completely, as if he were seeing a ghost. The phone slipped from his hand, falling to the carpet with a dull thud. Gail Elias Rohan felt the world spin around him. The girl's features were disturbingly familiar. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same delicate face that had long been a part of his most painful memories. Before he could process what was happening, a dizzying rush of dizziness overcame him, and he staggered, catching himself on the nearest table. "Mr. Rohan, are you okay?" The worried voice of Sophia Villar, the journalist responsible for covering the charity event, sounded nearby. She ran towards him, supporting him before he completely lost his balance. The security guards, who were about to remove Clara from the place, hesitated at the scene. Sophia looked at the ragged teenager, and something in her investigative instincts triggered an alert. There was more to this story than a simple event invasion. The girl's frightened eyes, the way Gail had reacted to her words, everything indicated a deeper mystery. "Let her stay," Sophia ordered the security guards with the authority that years of investigative reporting had given her. Turning to Clara, she asked softly, "What's your name?" "Clara." "Clara." "Jensen," the girl replied, still holding her faded backpack tightly to her chest, as if it held all her secrets. Gail, who was slowly regaining his color, fixed his gaze on Clara again. His hands trembled as he touched the silver ring on her finger, a replica of the original he had lost years ago, along with so many other precious things. How do you know this ring?" he asked, his voice barely concealing his emotion. Clara opened the backpack carefully, taking out the embroidered handkerchief and the yellowed photograph. Upon seeing the image, Gail turned pale again. There was Elisa, his one true love, smiling in that flowery dress that she loved to wear so much on spring Sundays. Sophia watched the scene with professional attention, her years of investigative, reporting experience making her mental gears turn rapidly. There was a story here, a story that needed to be told. "Why don't we go somewhere more private?" Sophia suggested, noticing that some guests were starting to observe the situation with curiosity. She led Gail and Clara to an empty meeting room on the hotel's mezzanine. In the most intimate setting, Clara began to tell her story. She spoke of the nights under makeshift awnings, of the note left by her mother, of the tireless search for the man with the silver ring. As she spoke, her fingers nervously stroked the edges of the handkerchief with the initials ER. Gael listened. In silence, each word the girl said making his heart tighten. The initials on the handkerchief, ER, he knew exactly what they meant. Elisa Ramos, the name he had tried to bury in the past, but which continued to live in every beat of his heart. Sophia sat discreetly in a corner of the room, watching the interaction with attentive eyes. As a journalist, she had covered hundreds of stories throughout her career, but something about this situation touched her differently. Maybe it was the vulnerability in Clara's eyes, or the way Gail seemed to struggle with his own emotions. "Mr. Rohan," Clara continued, her voice shaking slightly, "you knew my mother, didn't you?" Gail stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the illuminated city. The rain had eased, leaving only a thin mist that blurred the lights of the buildings. After a long moment of silence, he turned to Clara. "Yes," he finally replied, "I knew your mother, and I think I know you too, Clara." Sophia noticed the exact moment when something changed in the air in the room. It was as if an invisible door had been opened, revealing a path to long-hidden truths. She knew she was about to witness the beginning of an extraordinary story. Sophia Villar couldn't sleep that night. After the encounter at the Continental Hotel, her mind was racing with the possibilities of the story. As an investigative journalist, she had learned to trust her instincts, and something told her that she had to help Clara. The next morning, she walked the streets of downtown, looking for the girl. She found her sleeping under a canopy near the street market, hugging a torn blanket. Sophia approached cautiously, carrying a hot coffee and a freshly baked bread. The sweet aroma made Clara wake up, her eyes revealing a mixture of hope and distrust. "I brought you something to eat," Sophia offered, sitting down next to the girl. "Can we talk for a bit?" Clara accepted the coffee, her hands wrapping the warm cup as if it were a treasure. As she ate, she began to open up. She showed Sophia her notebook of poems, pages and pages filled with verses that spoke of longing, hope, and a maternal love that persisted even in absence. "You write very well," Sophia commented, genuinely impressed by the sensitivity of the verses. "Where did you learn it?" "My mother," Clara replied, a soft smile lighting her face. "She always said that words have the power to build bridges. Before she left, she taught me to read and write. She told me stories every Night. Sophia noticed that in addition to the poems, the notebook contained clippings from old newspapers. They were photos of social events, some of which had already turned yellow with age. In several of them, a young Gael Elias Rohan appeared, always elegant in his dark suit. "You've been investigating on your own," Sophia observed, impressed by the thoroughness of the research. Clara nodded, pulling the note her mother had left from her backpack. Sophia examined the paper with professional attention. Years of investigative reporting had sharpened her eye for detail, and something about the note caught her attention. Holding it up to the light, she noticed small raised marks. "Clara, have you noticed these marks?" he asked, running his fingers gently over the paper. The girl frowned curiously. "What marks?" Sophia took out her phone and, shining the flashlight at a specific angle, revealed a series of tiny, barely discernible dots and dashes on the paper. "This looks like a cipher," she muttered, more to herself than to Clara. "Your mother must have left a hidden message here." Carefully, Sophia photographed the note and enlarged the image on her cell phone screen. The dots formed a pattern that she recognized from an old news article about communication codes. After a few minutes of analysis, her eyes lit up with the discovery. "It's an address," he said, showing Clara how the dots lined up to form numbers and letters. 237 Acacia Street. Clara felt her heart race. "We need to go there," she exclaimed, already standing up. "Calm down," Sophia held her gently. "First you need to eat properly. Then we'll investigate this address together, calmly and carefully." While Clara finished her coffee, Sophia made some calls. As a journalist, she had access to databases and records that could help solve the mystery. She discovered that the address belonged to an old house now abandoned that had been rented out for short periods over the past few years. After getting Clara a new blanket and making sure she was fed properly, the two took a taxi. The house on Acacia Street was an old building with a small garden overgrown with weeds. The peeling blue paint on the walls told stories of neglect. Sophia used her journalist credentials to gain access to the property. Inside, they found furniture, covered in dusty sheets and walls stained with damp. Clara limped slightly as she explored the rooms, her eyes alert for any sign of her mother's presence. In the back room, a discovery, a shoebox hidden in the back of an old closet. Inside it, letters, dozens of them, never sent, all addressed. To Gael Elias Rohan. Sophia picked up one of them, dated 15 years ago, and began to read aloud. "My love, by the time you read this letter, I will be gone. Not by choice, but by necessity. There are secrets that need to be kept to protect those we love. Our daughter—" Sophia stopped abruptly, looking at Clara, who had frozen beside her. The confirmation was there, written in Elisa Ramos's own hand. Gael Elias Rohan was not just the man with the silver ring, he was Clara's father. In his luxurious penthouse office, Gael gazed out at the city through the large windows. His encounter with Clara had awakened memories he had spent years trying to bury. On his desk, an antique wooden box held his deepest secrets, a letter never sent and photographs from a happier time. The phone rang, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Sophia Villa. "Mr. Rohan," the journalist's voice sounded urgent. "We need to talk. It's about Clara and Elisa." 15 minutes later, Sophia and Clara entered his office. The girl was carrying the shoebox she had found in the abandoned house, her hands shaking slightly. Gael offered them a seat, noticing how Clara observed every detail of the environment with curious eyes. "We found something you need to see," Sophia said, taking the letters out of the box. "Elisa left a trail, Mr. Rohan, and I think it's time for some truths to come out." Gael took the letters with trembling hands. He immediately recognized Elisa's delicate handwriting. Each written word was like a stab in his heart, revealing a story of love, fear, and sacrifice that he had never fully known. "Why didn't you ever look for her?" Clara asked, her voice thick with restrained emotion. "Why did you let my mother go?" Gael stood up and walked over to his wooden box. He opened it carefully, revealing its contents. The letter he had never had the courage to send and old photographs. In one of them, he and Elisa were smiling, young and in love in front of a garden of jacaranda trees. I searched, her voice cracked. I searched for months, years. But your grandfather, Omar Rohan, was a powerful and ruthless man. He didn't approve of our relationship. Elisa was a public school literature teacher, from a simple family. To him, that was not suitable for the heir to the Rohan empire. Sophia frowned, her investigative skills alert. What exactly did Omar Rohan do? Gail took a deep breath, confronting painful memories. He threatened to destroy her career, to make sure she would never be able to work as a teacher anywhere again. But I didn't know. I didn't know she was pregnant when he left. Clara opened her backpack, pulling out the photograph of her mother in the flowery dress. This photo. Was it taken the day she decided to leave? Gail took the photograph, his eyes welling up. Yes, it was in the garden of the old house where we used to meet in hiding. She loved the jacarandas that bloomed in winter. She said they were a miracle of nature. Sophia mentally connected the dots. Mr. Rohan, there's something else we need to confirm. She hesitated for a moment. Would it be possible to run a DNA test? The silence that followed was heavy. Clara looked at her own hands clasped in her lap. Gail gazed at Elisa's photograph as if searching for answers in the smile frozen on the paper. Yes, he finally replied. Actually, I already arranged that last night. I couldn't sleep after the event. I made a few calls and a trusted lab can help us today. Clara looked up in surprise. You already suspected? Gail approached her, noticing for the first time how her smile was identical to Elisa's. From the moment I saw you, something in my heart knew. Your eyes are the same as hers, and that way you speak, the poetry you carry within you. It's as if Elisa were here. Sophia watched the scene with a mix of professional and personal emotion. As a journalist, she had covered hundreds of stories, but few had touched her so deeply. As a woman, she recognized the strength of a love that had survived time and circumstances. Let's do the test, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened to fall. But first I need you to promise me something. Anything, Gail replied without hesitation. Promise me you'll help me find my mother. She's alive, I know she is. And now, with these letters, we have more clues than ever before. The DNA test. Results arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Gail held the sealed envelope in his hands, while Clara and Sophia waited in silence in the penthouse office. The document confirmed what their hearts already knew. The genetic compatibility was unquestionable. Clara was, without a shadow of a doubt, the daughter of Gail Elias Rohan. In the days that followed, Gail tried to reach out to Clara with tentative gestures of fatherly affection. He adapted one of the penthouse bedrooms for her, painting the walls light blue, Elisa's favorite color. He bought her a comfortable bed, new clothes, and a bookshelf for her poetry books. Every morning he tried to make her breakfast, even though the eggs always came out a little burnt. Clara, in turn, observed everything with a mixture of fascination and fear. Years of living on the streets had taught her to be suspicious of sudden changes, but there was something in the clumsy way Gail tried to be a father that touched her heart. She would sometimes catch him reading her poems in secret, his eyes filling with tears when he found verses that reminded him of Elisa. You write just like her, he said one night, as they shared hot chocolate on the porch. Your mother had this gift for turning feelings into words. Clara smiled, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. I found this verse among the letters. She wrote it. If time fades my face, look at her, she is me. Gail felt his heart sink. How many years had he wasted? How many precious moments had he let slip away while drowning in contracts and empty meetings? Determined to make up for lost time, he began to actively participate in the search for Elisa. Sophia, using her journalistic contacts, discovered that the abandoned house on Acacia Street had been rented several times in recent years for short periods. The most intriguing thing was that all the contracts were signed by different pseudonyms, but with one thing in common. They all referred to flowers. Rosa Silva, Violeta Salen, Margarida Lima. Sophia listed the names, spreading documents, on the table. And the most recent from just 3 months ago, Floris. Clara, who was absent-mindedly leafing through a local newspaper, froze when she heard the last name. Floris? But that's the pseudonym of a columnist who writes for this newspaper. Sophia took the newspaper from Clara, her professional eyes quickly scanning the page. There it was, a weekly column by Floris, with chronicles of love, abandonment, and reunions. The most recent article was about a magnolia tree that bloomed out of season, turning winter into spring. "It's her," Clara whispered, her hands shaking as she touched the paper. "I've been reading these columns for months. How did I not notice before? She always writes about flowers, about waiting for the right moment to bloom." Gail leaned closer, reading over Clara's shoulder. The way she wrote, the metaphors she chose, even the way she constructed her sentences, everything screamed Elisa. As a literature teacher, she had always had a unique style, a special way of intertwining words and emotions. Sophia was already on the phone contacting the newspaper's editorial office. After a few calls and much insistence, she got some valuable information. The texts were sent weekly by email, always from the same email address. The editor said he had never met the author in person, Sophia explained, but he did mention that she always marks her texts with a small flower drawn in the corner of the page. What's more, all payments are donated to an institution that helps homeless children. Clara felt tears stream down her face. All this time, her mother had been so close, speaking to her through the pages of the newspaper. Each column was a message of love, a clue left purposefully so that one day she would be found. "There's one more thing," Sophia continued, her eyes shining with excitement at the discovery. "Floris's last email arrived this morning, and along with next week's text there was an interesting detail. She asked for a special announcement to be published in the Sunday edition." Gail and Clara looked at each other, anticipating what would come next. Sophia took out her tablet, showing the draft of the announcement that would be published. "To my little Clara of the Magnolia, the flowers always come back in spring, even when winter seems endless. Meet me where the purple petals paint the sky out of season." The old disused train station in the western part of the city held a flowery secret. Among the abandoned tracks and empty platforms, a solitary magnolia tree grew, defying the logic of the seasons by blooming in the middle of winter. It was there that Elisa Ramos had arranged the reunion through her coded message in the newspaper. Clara, Gail, and Sophia arrived at the station on a Sunday morning. The shy July sun painted long shadows on the concrete floor, while purple petals danced gently in the breeze. Clara held tightly to her notebook of poems, while Gail carried the old wooden box where he kept his most precious memories. "She'll come," Clara whispered, her eyes fixed on the flowering tree. "I know she will." Sophia kept a respectful distance, her camera ready to record the historic moment. As a journalist, she had followed countless stories of reunions, but none had touched her heart like this one. The sound of footsteps echoed across the empty platform. A female figure emerged from the shadows, wearing a flowery dress that danced in the wind. Elisa Ramos looked like she had stepped straight out of the yellowed photograph Clara had carried with her for so many years. Her face, marked by time, still held that warm smile that both Gail and Clara knew so well. The meeting was silent, filled with an emotion that words could not express. Clara took a step forward, limping slightly, and Elisa ran to embrace her. Mother and daughter merged in an embrace that attempted to make up for 15 years of absence. "My little poet," Elisa whispered tearfully, stroking her daughter's hair. "You've grown so much." Gail watched the scene, paralyzed by emotion. Elisa looked up, meeting his gaze. Years of secrets, fears, and longings seemed to float in the air between them. "Why, Elisa?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me about Clara?" Elisa gently pulled away from her daughter's embrace, but kept a hand on her shoulder. "Because your father came to visit me, Gail. Omar showed up at the school where I taught with his lawyer. They showed me documents, fabricated evidence that could incriminate me for embezzling school funds. They said they would destroy not only my career but my entire life." Sophia, who had been discreetly recording everything, felt her blood boil. As an investigative journalist, she was well aware of the intimidation tactics used by powerful people. "I was 3 months pregnant," Elisa continued. "I couldn't risk it. It wasn't just my life at stake, but our daughter's as well. So I ran away, leaving only clues that I hoped you would one day follow." Guile opened his wooden box, taking out the letter he never sent. "I wrote to you every day for the first year, but I never knew where to send the letters." Clara, who had been listening in silence until then, opened her notebook of poems. "I wrote too, Mom, every day, even without knowing if one day you would read it." Elisa smiled through her tears. "I read it, my dear, every word. I'm your most faithful reader in the local paper. When I saw your poems being published in the literary section under the pseudonym Clara of the Magnolia, I knew it was you. No one else could write with such love about a tree that blooms in winter." Sophia realized it was time to give the family more privacy. She began to walk away discreetly, but Elisa called her. "Please stay," he pleaded. "This story needs to be told. People need to know that love always finds a way, even when it seems impossible." Guile approached Elisa and Clara, his eyes reflecting years of regret and hope. Can we try again? Build something new together?" Elisa looked at her daughter, who nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, but this time without secrets, without fears. Omar can no longer threaten us." "No," Guile agreed. "He can't. I'm not that scared young man I was 15 years ago, and I have the resources to protect you now." Clara took her mother's and father's hands, joining them over her notebook of poems. Above them, the magnolia continued to shed its purple petals, transforming that moment into a scene worthy of poetry. In the days that followed their reunion at the station, life began to take on new contours. Gail rented 2 houses, a small and cozy guest house for Elisa and Clara, and a modest apartment for himself, abandoning the coldness of the luxurious penthouse. Between the 2 residences, there was a vacant lot that by coincidence or fate was home to a small magnolia tree. Adapting wasn't easy. Clara, accustomed to the freedom of the streets, needed to adjust to the routine of a real home. Her nights were now spent in a soft bed, but sometimes she woke up startled, instinctively reaching for the torn blanket that had been her only comfort for so long. Elisa devoted herself to relearning the role of a full-time mother. Her newspaper columns, now signed with her real name, took on a more hopeful tone. She transformed the small back room of the boarding house into a writing space where mother and daughter would spend hours sharing poetry and stories. Guile, meanwhile, was facing his own challenges. The news of his newfound paternity sent shockwaves through the business community, and his father, Omar Rohan, was quick to react. One particularly tense morning, the family patriarch showed up unannounced at his office. "Do you have any idea of the scandal you're causing?" Omar's voice echoed through the room. "A daughter of the streets, a runaway teacher? The shareholders are restless, Guile." Guile, who years ago would have cowered in the face of his father's fury, stood his ground. "They are my family, father. Clara is your granddaughter, whether you accept it or not. And as for Elisa, you know very well why she ran away." Omar walked over to the window, his reflection in the glass revealing a grim expression. "I can make this story go away. I have contacts. We can arrange a generous financial settlement for both of you." "No." Guile's answer was categorical. "I've already lost 15 years because of your way of doing things. This ends here." The confrontation between father and son was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sophia VR entered, carrying a thick folder of documents. Her timing was perfect, as always. "Mr. Omar Rohan," she said, her professional voice masking a quiet satisfaction. "It's good to see you here. I've just completed a very interesting investigation into certain corporate bullying practices over the past 20 years. Would you like to give your side of the story?" Omar paled slightly. Sophia continued, opening her folder. "I have here testimonies from former employees, documents about veiled threats, including a particularly interesting story about a literature teacher and forged documents." "This is defamation," Omar protested, but his voice had lost its former strength. No, Mr. Rohan, Sophia corrected calmly. This is investigative journalism, and I believe the shareholders would be much more disturbed by such stories than by the discovery of a talented granddaughter. Gail watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. Sophia had become more than an ally. She was a true protector of that family in reconstruction. The choice is yours, Father, Gail said softly. You can accept your granddaughter and make her part of our family, or you can continue your manipulations and face the consequences. Omar Rohan, for the first time in his life, seemed speechless. His eyes scanned the documents in Sophia's hands, then focused on a photograph on Gail's desk. Clara smiling beside the magnolia tree, her eyes identical to her mother's, her smile a perfect replica of Elisa's. The old businessman loosened his tie, dropping heavily into a chair. She really does look like Elisa, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. Yes, Gail replied, and he has the same gift for poetry. In fact, some of his poems have already been published in the local newspaper. Want to see? Something. In Omar's expression changed subtly. It was as if, for the first time, he saw beyond appearances, beyond the potential scandals and financial losses. Maybe, just maybe, there was room in his heart for a new story. Clara stared at her reflection in the mirror at the doctor's office, unable to believe her transformation. After months of treatment with an orthopedic specialist, her gait had improved significantly. The discreet and efficient orthopedic device allowed her to move more easily, although she still had a slight limp that, according to the doctor, would probably be permanent. It's part of who you are, Elisa said, holding his hand during another physical therapy session. Every step you take tells a story of overcoming. Life had found a new rhythm. Mornings were filled with private lessons. Gail had insisted on hiring the best tutors to help Clara make up for the years of formal education she had lost. Afternoons were devoted to medical treatment and, in between, to poetry. It was during one of these afternoons that Clara discovered a new talent. While absent-mindedly strumming an old guitar she had found in the guest house, she realized that her poems could be set to melody. Her words, when sung, took on an even deeper dimension. You have a gift for music, Elisa observed, moved to hear her daughter turn her verses into songs. Your maternal grandmother was like that too. She turned stories into melodies. Gail, who was spending more and more time with them, arranged for music lessons. Soon, Clara began recording short videos of her compositions and sharing them on social media. To her surprise, her song poems began to go viral. It's amazing how people connect with your story, said Sophia, who remained close to the family, now more as a friend than a journalist. Your verses about hope and new beginnings touch something deep in people. One particularly important afternoon, the family received an unexpected visitor. Omar Rohan, carrying a package in his hands, knocked on the door of the guest house. His face, previously always austere, showed a new vulnerability. I brought something for Clara, he said, handing the package to his granddaughter. I found it in the attic of the mansion. Inside the package was an antique guitar, exquisitely preserved. It belonged to your grandmother, my late wife, Omar explained, his voice breaking. She wrote songs too. I've never told anyone this, but she came from a simple family like Elisa. That's why I was so opposed to your relationship. I was afraid history would repeat itself. Clara hugged the guitar to her chest, feeling the weight of family history in her hands. Would you like to hear one of my songs? She offered shyly. Omar nodded, sitting down on the small sofa in the living room. Clara began to play, her soft voice filling the room with verses about a magnolia tree that bloomed in winter, about unlikely encounters, and about love that survives time. When the song ended, there were tears in the old businessman's eyes. You sing just like her, he whispered. That evening, after Omar had left, the family gathered in the vacant lot between the houses. The small magnolia tree they had planted together weeks earlier was already showing signs of growth. You know, Clara said, looking at the tree, I think I've found the perfect name for our project. Gail and Elisa looked at each other curiously. Since their reunion, they had been discussing the idea of creating a shelter for homeless children, especially those with disabilities. Green Harmony Institute, Clara announced, smiling. A place where stories can flourish even when it seems impossible. Elisa hugged her daughter, while Gail took notes on his cell phone, already planning the first steps to make the dream come true. Sophia, who was recording the moment with her camera, smiled when she realized that she was witnessing not only the rebirth of a family, but the beginning of something much bigger. The Instituto Harmonia Verde began as a shared dream on a starry night, but quickly became a reality. Gail used his business contacts to acquire an old mansion with a large plot of land large enough to house not only the project's facilities, but also a generous garden where several magnolia saplings were planted. Elisa took on the role of pedagogical coordinator, developing an educational program that combined art, literature, and academic support. Her experience as a teacher and writer proved essential in creating a welcoming and stimulating environment. At the entrance to the institute, Clara's first poem was framed on a bronze plaque, "Here lives what is not lost." Clara, in turn, surprised everyone with her dedication to the project. Despite still being in the process of catching up on her studies, she insisted on actively participating. Her music lessons became one of the highlights of the program, attracting children who, like her, had stories of overcoming difficulties. "Each of you has a song inside you," she told her young students as she taught them to transform their experiences into verse and melody. "Sometimes we just need to find the right instrument to play it." Sophia, who had become a member of the Institute's advisory board, produced a series of reports on the project. Her articles not only attracted donors and volunteers, but also helped raise awareness about the reality of homeless children and children with disabilities. One day, during one of her music lessons, Clara received a surprise. A girl of about 8 years old, wearing a similar orthopedic device to hers, approached her timidly with a notebook in her hands. I wrote a poem," said little Marina, holding out the notebook. "It's about my mother, who went to the stars." Clara read the nursery rhymes with tears in her eyes, recognizing in them the same pain and hope that had once filled her own pages. That afternoon, she and Marina composed a song together, transforming their longing into music. The video of the two singing, shared on the Institute's social media, instantly went viral. The touching story of the teacher who once lived on the streets and now helped other children find their voice captured the country's attention. Omar Rohan, who initially kept a respectful distance from the project, gradually became involved. He started by donating musical instruments, then medical equipment for the physiotherapy room. But it was when he watched the children's end-of-year performance that something really changed in his heart. On the improvised stage in the garden, under the shade of young jacaranda trees, Clara and her students presented a show that mixed music, poetry, and adapted dance. Children with different types of disabilities showed that art knows no limitations. "You know," Omar told Gail during the performance, "your mother would have loved to see this. She always said that music has the power to heal souls." Gail looked at his father in surprise. In all his years of life, he had never heard him speak so openly about his late mother. "Why didn't you ever tell me about her musical talent?" he asked. Omar sighed, his eyes fixed on the stage where Clara was helping a young student position her fingers on the guitar. "Because it hurt too much. When she left, I buried all the music in my life with her. It was a mistake, son. A mistake that almost happened again with you and Elisa." At the center of the stage, Clara began to sing a new composition, a song about trees that grow in unlikely terrain and flowers that bloom in the cracks in the concrete. Her voice, now more mature and confident, carried echoes of 3 generations, of women who transformed pain into art. Elisa, sitting in the front row, held a new notebook where she jotted down ideas for future columns. Her newspaper stories had been turned into a book that would be released the following month, with all proceeds going to the Institute. "Sometimes," she wrote in her notebook as she watched her daughter on stage, "we have to get lost in order, to find our way back not only home but to ourselves. And in the process, we discover that we can help others find their own way." The success of Instituto Harmonia Verde brought significant changes to the entire family. Gael, inspired by the work developed there, began to rethink his company's practices. He implemented inclusion programs and created a specific fund for social projects, proving that it was possible to combine business success with social responsibility. The small boarding house where Elisa and Clara lived was transformed into a cultural space with a community library on the ground floor. Books, many of them donated by readers of their chronicles, occupied shelves made by local carpenters. The walls were decorated with photographs taken by Sophia, documenting the journey of the family and the institute. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing some newly arrived books, Elisa found a surprise among the donations, an old copy of poetry with a family dedication on the first page. "To my dear daughter-in-law who taught me that music can exist even in silence. With love, Helena Rohan." "It was Grandma's," said Clara, who helped organize it. "Grandpa Omar told me that she wrote poems in secret, but never had the courage to publish them." Elisa leafed through the book carefully, discovering pages and pages of notes in the margins, verses added by hand in delicate calligraphy. "They're beautiful," she murmured, moved. The discovery inspired a new project. With Sophia's help, they organized a special event at the Institute, an evening of poetry and music where 3 generations of women would be celebrated. Helena Rohan's poems would finally be presented to the public, along with Elisa's chronicles and Clara's songs. The Institute's garden was decorated with soft lights, and chairs were placed among the jacaranda trees that, although still young, were already beginning to show their first flower buds. The audience was an interesting mix: businessmen in expensive suits sitting next to former homeless people, university professors chatting with children from the project, all united by the magic of art. Omar Rohan arrived early, carrying an old, wooden box. "I found more of your grandmother's things," he told Clara. Inside the box were handwritten sheet music, a few yellowed photographs, and a delicate necklace with a magnolia-shaped pendant. "She wore this necklace when she sang," he explained, his voice choked with emotion. "She said it brought her luck. I think it belongs to you now, Clara." The presentation began at sunset. Sophia, who had become a constant and beloved presence in the family, opened the presentation by telling the story of the Institute and how a tree that blooms in winter has become a symbol of transformation and hope. Clara, wearing her grandmother's necklace, performed her new compositions accompanied by her students. Marina, the little poet who had inspired so many changes, had a special solo, a song that spoke of finding family in the most unexpected places. Elisa read excerpts from her chronicles, interspersing them with the recently discovered poems of Helena Rohan. The words of grandmother and granddaughter, separated by time but united by art, created an emotional tapestry that touched each person present. Gael watched everything with his heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. Beside him, Omar Rohan no longer tried to hide the tears that were running down his face. The hardline businessman had given way to a doting grandfather who now attended all the Institute's presentations, always carrying a camera to record every moment. At the end of the evening, Clara took the stage again for one last song. It was a special composition created in collaboration with her students that spoke of the transformative power of love and art. As she sang, small purple petals began to fall. The first magnolia in the garden had chosen that moment to bloom. "Look," Marina exclaimed, pointing to the tree. "It's a miracle." Elisa smiled, hugging her daughter. "No, dear, it's just nature reminding us that there's always time to bloom." Sophia captured the moment on camera, the purple petals falling on 3 generations of the Rohan family, united at last beneath a starry sky and a magnolia tree in bloom. The photo would later be framed and hung in the entrance of the Institute, next to Clara's first poem, as a silent testament to the fact that the greatest miracles happen when we open our hearts to new possibilities. The success of the 3 Generations of Poetry event opened new doors for the Instituto Harmonia Verde. A renowned publisher proposed the publication of a special book bringing together Helena Rohan's poems, Elisa's chronicles and Clara's song lyrics, along with Sophia's photographs documenting the history of the family and the institute. Clara, who was now working on completing her studies through a special program, discovered a new passion: music therapy. Her personal experiences with music as a form of healing led her to research the subject further, and she soon began developing a specific program for children with different types of disabilities. Music is not just about notes and melodies, she explained during a meeting with the Institute staff. It's about finding your own voice, even when the world tells you you can't sing. One particularly momentous morning, Clara received an unexpected visitor in her music room. An elegant lady wearing a colorful shawl stood in the doorway, watching her work with a group of children. "Mrs. Melia?" Clara exclaimed, immediately recognizing the lady from the market who had given her the torn blanket years ago. How did you find me?" The lady smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I always knew you would do something special. Girl, I saw your story in the newspaper in Sophia's reports. I kept every clipping." Meeting Mrs. Melia again brought back memories that Clara had kept in a special corner of her heart. The market lady had not just been someone who had given her a blanket, she had been one of the few people who had treated her with dignity during her years on the streets. "Come," Clara said, taking the lady's hand. "I want to show you something." He took Mrs. Melia to a special room in the Institute, where framed in a glass case was the old torn blanket. Beside it, a plaque explained its importance. Sometimes the greatest act of love comes in the form of a simple blanket. This was the first hug I received from the streets. Mrs. Melia covered her mouth with her hands, overcome with emotion. "You saved—" "I did," Clara confirmed, "and now it reminds us every day that small acts of kindness can change a lifetime." Ms. Melia's visit inspired a new project at the Institute. Clara and Elisa began mapping out people who, like her, had made a difference in the lives of street children. Shopkeepers who offered food, teachers who volunteered to teach, street artists who shared their knowledge. "They are urban angels," Elisa said, as she worked on a special series of chronicles about these people. Unsung heroes who transform the city into a more human place. Gail, touched by the stories, decided to create a recognition program within his company. Employees were encouraged to participate in social projects, and those who already did volunteer work received support to expand their initiatives. Sophia followed everything closely, but now not only as a journalist. She had become an integral part of the extended family that the Institute had created. Her photographs not only documented stories, but helped tell them in a way that words alone could not. One afternoon, while photographing a music class, Sophia captured a magical moment. Clara, wearing her grandmother's magnolia necklace, was teaching Marina how to play the guitar. The little student, who had previously been barely able to hold the instrument due to her physical condition, was now playing her first notes. "How do you make it look so easy?" Marina asked, frustrated after several attempts to hit a chord. Clara smiled, gently adjusting the girl's fingers on the strings. "It's not about making it look easy," she replied. "It's about finding your own way of making music. Look, I have my limitations too, but I've found that they don't define my music. They make it unique." The lesson resonated throughout the room, touching not only Marina, but all the children present. Sophia, watching through her lens, realized that she was witnessing more than a music lesson. It was a lesson in acceptance, resilience, and self-love. The launch of the book, 3 Generations of Magnolia, took place on a special evening at the Institute. The garden, now more mature, was full of jacarandas in full bloom, creating a magical setting under the lights gently arranged between the branches. The event brought together not only family and friends, but also all the urban angels that Elisa had portrayed in her chronicles. Madame Melia occupied a place of honor in the front row, her colorful shawl sprinkled with purple petals that fell gently from the trees. Clara, wearing a flowery dress that resembled her mother's in the old photograph, was preparing for a special performance. Her students in the music therapy program would form a unique choir, where each would participate in their own way, some singing, some playing adapted instruments, and some simply moving to the rhythm of the music. "Nervous?" Elisa asked, helping her daughter adjust the magnolia necklace. "A little," Clara admitted, "but it's a good kind of nervousness, like the kind I felt when I first saw Dad at the hotel." Gail, who was approaching at that moment, smiled when he heard the comment. "And I almost fainted when I saw you," he joked, hugging his daughter. Omar Rohan arrived carrying a surprise, an old album he had found in the mansion's attic. The yellowed pages contained photos of Helena performing in a choir, newspaper clippings about small musical events she had attended, and handwritten sheet music with notes in the margins. "Your grandmother never realized her dream of having her songs published," he told Clara. "But through you, through this book, she will finally be heard." The presentation began with Sophia giving a moving introduction. She spoke about how a story that began with a torn blanket and a mysterious note had turned into a movement of love and social change. The Institute choir performed next. Clara led the group with natural grace, adapting her movements so that each child could follow her. Marina, now much more confident with her guitar, had a special solo, a song she had composed about her time at the Institute. During the performance, something extraordinary happened. The petals of the jacaranda trees, which normally fell gently, began to dance in the air, creating purple spirals that seemed to follow the music. Many later swore that it was just the wind, but Madame Melia, with her simple wisdom, had another explanation. "It was Lady Helena," she whispered to Elisa. "I came dancing with the petals to bless your family." After the choir, Clara performed a new composition, written especially for that evening. It was a song that intertwined excerpts from her grandmother's poems, her mother's chronicles, and her own experiences. The soft melody spoke of three women who, separated by time but united by their love of art, had found ways to flourish even in the harshest winters. Elisa, sitting between Gail and Omar, held a copy of the recently released book in her hands. On the cover, a photograph taken by Sophia showed 3 generations of jacarandas in the Institute's garden. An old and majestic tree, a medium-sized one in full bloom, and a newly planted sapling, all sharing the same soil. "This is how love grows," she wrote in the dedication of her copy. "Like a magnolia that blooms in winter, defying the seasons, reminding us that there is always time to begin again." Late in the evening, when most of the guests had left, the family remained in the garden. Clara, still holding her guitar, began to softly strum a melody her grandmother had written, which she had found among the sheet music in the old album. "You?" "No," she said, looking at the purple petals that covered the ground like a carpet. "I think I finally understand why jacarandas bloom in winter." "Why?" asked Sophia, who was recording the moment with her camera. "Because sometimes we need to see beauty where no one else expects to find it," Clara replied, her smile lighting up the night. "Like poetry in the streets, music in the silence, or family in the most unlikely places." The success of the book, 3 Generations of Magnolia, exceeded all expectations. In less than a month, the first edition sold out completely, and the intertwined stories of Helena, Elisa, and Clara began to inspire similar projects in other cities. The Institute received daily messages from people interested in replicating the model, transforming art into a tool for social transformation. Clara, now 18 years old, had not only finished her regular studies but also started a technical course in music therapy. Her classes at the Institute became a reference, attracting professionals in the field who wanted to learn her unique methodology of working with children. One Monday morning, while organizing sheet music in her office, Clara received a visit. That would change the course of her life even further. An elegant lady, introducing herself as Dr. Isabel Sallin, coordinator of the music department at the city's largest university, had come to see for herself the work being done at the Institute. "Your method is revolutionary, Clara," Dr. Isabel said after observing a music therapy session. "The way you adapt instruments to each child, how you use music to develop not only motor skills, but also self-esteem and emotional expression. It's extraordinary." Clara blushed slightly at the compliment. "I learned from my own limitations," she replied, instinctively adjusting her orthopedic device. "Every challenge taught me to find new paths." "That's exactly why I'm here," the professor continued. "We want to create a special scholarship in our music department, a scholarship that bears your name and is intended for students with disabilities who want to specialize in music therapy." The news took Clara by surprise. "A bag with my name on it?" "Yes," Dr. Isabel smiled. "The Clara Jensen Scholarship for Inclusive Music Therapy Studies, and we would like you to be our first student." Elisa, who was passing by the room at that moment, stopped to listen to the conversation. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw her daughter's radiant face. How many times during the difficult years on the streets had she dreamed of a future like that for Clara? The news spread quickly throughout the institute. Sophia showed up late that afternoon, camera in hand, eager to document yet another chapter in history. She found Clara in the garden, sitting under her favorite magnolia tree, composing a new song. "Have you decided whether you're going to accept?" Sophia asked, sitting down next to her friend. Clara strummed a few notes on her guitar before answering. "You know, I spent so much time searching for a place to belong, and now I realize I found so much more than that. I found purpose." Gael, upon hearing the news, organized a small celebration in the apartment he now shared with Elisa. They had married in an intimate ceremony a few months earlier, making official a union that time and circumstances had tried to prevent. During dinner, Omar Rohan surprised everyone with an announcement. "I have decided to transform the family mansion into an extension of the institute," he declared, his voice carrying a rare emotion. "Helena always wanted this place to be full of music and life. It is time to fulfill that wish." The Rohan Mansion, an imposing mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, had a private auditorium that Helena used for her secret rehearsals. The space, closed for years, would be restored and transformed into a cultural center. "And there's more," Omar continued, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "I found this on Helena's old piano. I think she'd like you to have it, Clara." Inside. The envelope was a handwritten score yellowed with age. The title, written in Helena's delicate handwriting, read, "Symphony of the Jacarandas, for the granddaughter I have not yet met, but who already carries my music in her blood." Clara held the sheet music with trembling hands, while Sophia captured the moment with her camera. It was as if Helena had left a gift hidden in time, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. "I'll play it," Clara decided, her eyes shining with determination. "At the opening of the cultural center, and I won't play it alone. I'll arrange the music so that all the children at the institute can participate, each in their own way." Elisa hugged her daughter, feeling that a new cycle was beginning. The magnolia they had planted on the day of their reunion now bloomed majestically in the garden, its purple petals dancing in the wind like musical notes on an invisible score. The transformation of the Rohan Mansion into a cultural center has become the talk of the town. Architects were hired to carry out the renovation, preserving the historic features of the mansion while adapting the spaces for full accessibility. The old auditorium, where Helena used to rehearse, would be the heart of the project. Clara was busy preparing for the inaugural performance. Her grandmother's Symphony of the Jacarandas was a complex piece, which she was carefully adapting to include all the students at the institute. Marina, now an accomplished guitarist despite her physical limitations, was to be one of the soloists. "Every note has to find its perfect interpreter," Clara explained during rehearsals. "We're not just playing music, we're telling our story." Meanwhile, Elisa was preparing a special surprise. With Sophia's help, she had collected testimonials from all the people whose lives had been touched by the institute. Former students who were now in college, children who had found a new way to express themselves through music, families who had regained hope. "Let's project these testimonies during the presentation," Sophia suggested, showing Elisa the edited footage. It will be like a choir of voices joining the music. The week before the inauguration, something unexpected happened. While cleaning out the mansion's attic, Omar found a box of old cassette tapes. They were recordings of Helena rehearsing the Symphony of the Jacarandas, accompanied by her notes. On each section of the music, she said that this symphony was like a musical magnolia, Omar said, listening to the tapes with Clara. The roots are the bass notes of the piano, the trunk is marked by the cellos, and the flowers are the high notes of the violins and flutes. Clara spent entire nights listening to her grandmother's voice on tapes, absorbing every nuance, every musical intention. It was like receiving lessons directly from Helena, traveling through time through music. The opening day arrived with a surprisingly blue sky for a winter morning. The mansion's garden had been transformed. Dozens of young jacaranda trees had been planted, creating a flower-filled path to the entrance of the cultural center. The auditorium was packed. In the front row, Elisa and Gael held hands, their hearts pounding in anticipation. Beside them, Madame Melia proudly displayed her new shawl, a gift from Clara, patterned with jacarandas. Omar took his place with emotional dignity, carrying a photo of Helena as a young woman. The show began with the projection of testimonies collected by Elisa and Sophia. Faces and voices appeared on the screen, telling stories of transformation and hope. Then the lights dimmed, and Clara appeared on stage. "Tonight," she began, her voice firm and clear, "we will not present just a symphony. We will present a dream that has spanned 3 generations, a dream that, like a magnolia, grew in unlikely soil and bloomed in winter." The music began softly, with Clara on the piano playing the introduction composed by Helena. Gradually, other instruments joined in, Marina's guitar, adapted percussion instruments played by children of varying abilities, a choir of voices, ranging from the youngest students to the elderly from the Institute's community project. At the most emotional moment of the performance, purple petals began to fall gently onto the stage, a special system installed on the ceiling, Gail's idea to pay homage to both Helena and Clara. The effect was magical. Music and nature merged into a single expression of beauty. Sophia, moving discreetly around the auditorium with her camera, captured every moment. Omar's proud smile, Elisa's silent tears, Mrs. Melia's look of wonder, Marina's passionate concentration on the guitar. When the last note sounded, there was a moment of absolute silence. It was as if everyone needed a moment to absorb the magnitude of what they had just experienced. Then the audience erupted in applause. Clara, standing in the center of the stage, looked up to where a single purple petal still danced in the air. For a brief moment, she was certain that her grandmother was there, smiling. Her dream finally realized through the hands and heart of her granddaughter. The success of the Jacaranda Symphony exceeded all expectations. Videos of the performance, shared on social media, quickly went viral. The story of 3 generations of female artists from the Rohan family, together with the transformative work of the Institute, captured the imagination of the public in a unique way. Clara, now dividing her time between music therapy school and the Institute, began receiving invitations to present her work at international conferences and events. Her innovative methodology of inclusive music education attracted the attention of experts from all over the world. One Thursday afternoon, while preparing material for her classes, Clara received an unexpected visitor. A young woman on crutches introduced herself as Bianca Caron, director of a music conservatory in Portugal. "I came to see your work in person," Bianca explained, her eyes shining with interest. "When I saw the video of the symphony, I knew we needed to bring this methodology to Portugal. We have so many children and young people who could benefit from it." Clara listened attentively as Bianca explained her proposal, a cultural exchange between the Instituto Harmonia Verde and the Lisbon Conservatory. The idea was for Clara to spend 3 months in Portugal implementing her inclusive music program, while Portuguese teachers would come to the country to learn the methodology. "And the most interesting thing," Bianca continued, "is that we discovered that we also have jacarandas in Lisbon. They were taken from the country in the 19th century, and curiously, they also flower out of season. The proposal was tempting, but Clara hesitated. Leaving the institute for 3 months seemed scary. How would her students react? How would Marina, who had practically become her little sister, deal with her absence? Elisa, who had overheard part of the conversation, came into the room with a cup of coffee for Bianca. "You know," she said, sitting down next to her daughter, "sometimes we need to step back a little so that others can flourish too." Sophia, who had been photographing a class upstairs, joined the group. Her journalistic eye could already see the possibilities. "We could document the whole process," she suggested. "Show how music truly has no boundaries." News of the possible trip spread quickly throughout the institute. Marina was the first to react, surprising everyone with her maturity. "You have to go," she told Clara, "and when you come back, I'll play a Portuguese song on the guitar to welcome you." Gael and Omar immediately began planning how the institute would operate during Clara's absence. "We could use technology so that you can continue teaching some classes online," Gail suggested, ever practical, "and that could open doors for us to reach even more people." During a meeting with all the teachers and students of the institute, Clara shared the proposal. To her surprise, she found not only support but enthusiasm. Her students, many of whom had never imagined that their limitations could be transformed into gifts, saw in this opportunity a confirmation that there were no limits to their dreams. "Before you decide," Clara said to Bianca, "I need to show you something." He took the visitor to the garden, where the jacaranda trees planted on the day the cultural center was inaugurated were already beginning to show their first buds. He stopped in front of the oldest tree, the one that had bloomed in winter since his parents were reunited. "This is where I learned my most important lesson," Clara explained. "That sometimes we need to be like these trees, to put down deep roots in order to grow toward the sky. My roots are here, in the Institute, in my family, in the stories of each person who has passed through our lives. And perhaps now is the time to allow those roots to nourish new gardens." Bianca smiled, understanding perfectly. "In Lisbon," she said, "we have a saying, 'Whoever plants jacarandas plants dreams in bloom.' It seems your dreams are ready to bloom beyond borders." That night, Clara sat in her room writing in her poetry notebook, the same one she had carried when she was homeless, now filled with pages and pages of new verses. She began to compose a song about birds that fly far away, but always know their way back to their nest. The decision to accept the exchange program in Portugal marked the beginning of a new phase, not only for Clara, but for the entire institute. In the months leading up to her trip, intense preparation took place. Teachers were trained to continue the music therapy program, video conferencing systems were installed for online classes, and each student was given a special project to develop. During their mentor's absence, Marina, who had become one of the Institute's leading young instructors, would take over some of the beginning classes. "It's like you're passing the baton to me," she told Clara during a rehearsal. "But don't worry, I'll give it back to you when you get back." Elisa observed the changes with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. Her daughter, who once slept under awnings hugging a torn blanket, was now preparing to take her art overseas. To celebrate this new stage, she began writing a special series of chronicles entitled "Letters to My Traveling Daughter." Sophia, always on the lookout for stories that needed to be told, proposed a special documentary. "We will follow not only his journey in Portugal," she explained, "but also show how the Institute continues to flourish here. It will be like a garden that expands across 2 continents." Gael and Omar surprised Clara with a special gift. They had located a Portuguese luthier who restored old instruments to adapt them to musicians with different needs. "You can take our methodology," Gael said, "and bring back new techniques to help even more people." The day before the trip, the Institute organized a special celebration. The garden was decorated with soft lights, and each student prepared a presentation. Mrs. Melia, who was now coordinating a craft project at the Institute, had made small, magnolia-shaped brooches for everyone present. "So that you never forget," she said to Clara, pinning one of the brooches to her blouse, "that some flowers need to fly with the wind to spread their seeds." During the celebration, something magical happened. Marina took the stage carrying not only her guitar, but also a surprise. She had composed her first song. "It's called Vu, do Magnolia," she announced, starting to play a melody that mixed local and Portuguese elements. Clara, sitting between her parents, felt tears of emotion run down her face. Marina's music perfectly captured everything the Institute stood for: overcoming limits, the beauty in differences, the power of art as a universal language. Omar, who in recent months had become a completely different grandfather from the stern businessman he once was, stood up to make an announcement. "In honor of this new phase," he said, his voice breaking, "we have decided to create a special fund at the Institute. The Helena Rohan Fund for Artistic Exchanges will allow other young talents to soar beyond borders as well." The news was greeted with enthusiastic applause. Sophia, who was recording everything with her camera, captured the exact moment when a strong gust of wind rained purple petals down on everyone present, as if the jacarandas themselves were applauding. At the end of the evening, Clara gathered everyone in a large circle in the garden. Together they sang the Jacaranda Symphony, but this time with a twist. Each person added their own variation to the original melody, creating a unique and unrepeatable version of the song. "That's how art grows," Clara explained, looking fondly at each familiar face. "Not just repeating itself, but transforming itself, taking on new meanings each time it's shared." Before retiring, Clara made one last visit to her favorite magnolia tree. She hung on it a small plaque that she had made especially for that evening. On it was written a verse that summed up everything she had learned on her journey. "Don't be afraid to fly the deepest roots. They are the ones that give us wings." Lisbon greeted Clara with a surprisingly familiar sky. Purple petals danced in the air over the old city, as if the Portuguese jacarandas had arranged to bloom for her arrival. The Lisbon Conservatory, a historic 19th century building, had its own gardens where several of these trees grew majestically. Bianca had prepared everything with attention to detail. The apartment where Clara would be staying overlooked a small park, and her classroom at the conservatory was specially adapted with instruments modified for different needs. The first few weeks were filled with intense mutual learning. Clara discovered that the Portuguese had their own techniques for inclusive music, developed over years of working with special needs students. At the same time, her local methodology, born from her experiences at the Instituto Harmonia Verde, brought a unique approach that delighted everyone. "It's like you have the sun in your fingers," said Marco, a young Portuguese student with cerebral palsy after managing to play his first notes on the adapted piano. "Music seems easier when you teach it." Weekly video conferences with the Institute kept Clara connected to her roots. Marina, keeping her promise, had already mastered several Portuguese songs on the guitar and taught them to the other students. Cultural exchange happened naturally, with children from both countries exchanging experiences and music through screens. Sophia, who had traveled to Lisbon to document the beginning of the project, captured precious moments, Clara teaching Fado to her students via video conference. Music truly knew no boundaries. A special discovery came when Clara visited the conservatory library. Among the old sheet music, she found a composition that mentioned jacarandas. It was a piece written by a Portuguese composer who had visited the country in the 19th century and was enchanted by the flowering trees. "This can't be a coincidence," she told Bianca, showing her the yellowed sheet music. "It's as if there's an invisible thread connecting our stories through time." The old score inspired an ambitious project, a concert that would unite musicians from both countries. Using live streaming technology, students from the Institute and the conservatory in Portugal would play together, creating a musical bridge across the Atlantic. Elisa, who followed everything through her chronicles, wrote, "There are times when distance is just a geographical detail. When the music plays, when hearts beat to the same rhythm, the ocean between us turns into a river of melodies." In the capital, the Institute continued to flourish in unexpected ways. Marina had started her own project, teaching music to children in hospitals. Using Clara's methodology, adapted to her own style, she brought hope through art to those who needed it most. Gael and Omar expanded the Helena Rohan Fund, establishing partnerships with other cultural institutions around the world. The dream of truly inclusive music began to take on global dimensions. Mrs. Melia, with her simple wisdom, summed up the moment during one of the video conferences. "See, girl, you planted a magnolia, and it grew so tall that its flowers now fall on another continent." Clara smiled, fingering the magnolia brooch she always carried with her. From her window in Lisbon, she could see the flowering trees of the park dancing in the afternoon breeze. She picked up her guitar and began to compose a new song, blending the sounds of her two homes, the warmth of the city and Portuguese nostalgia, the hustle and bustle, the new and the old. In his poetry notebook, now with notes in Portuguese from Portugal mixed with his local language, he wrote, "There are flowers that know no borders. There are songs that don't need translation. There are loves that grow stronger in distance, like jacarandas that bloom in any season." The grand concert, Jacarandá Sem Fronteiras, was scheduled for a special night when the full moon would illuminate both Lisbon and the capital. The garden of the Institute was full of people. A giant screen installed between the trees would allow everyone to follow the simultaneous presentation in Portugal. Clara, wearing a blue dress with small rosewood embroidery, a gift from the artisans coordinated by Senhora Melia, would conduct the orchestra from the Lisbon Conservatory. Marina, wearing a similar dress, would conduct the group from the Institute in the capital. Technology would allow the two orchestras to play in perfect synchrony, creating a unique musical experience. The program included the old Portuguese sheet music discovered by Clara, Helena's Sinfonia dos Jacarandas, and a special composition created jointly by students from both countries. Each piece represented a different chapter in this story that now transcended oceans. Moments before the concert began, Clara made a video call to her family. Elisa and Gail, elegantly dressed, were sitting in the front row of the Institute's garden. Omar, who in recent months had become a completely different grandfather, proudly held a camera. He wanted to capture every moment in person, even with Sophia and her professional team present. "Are you nervous?" Elisa asked, noticing a special sparkle in her daughter's eyes. "A little," Clara admitted, smiling, "but it's that good nervousness, like when a magnolia is about to bloom." The concert began just as the moon reached its highest point in the sky. The first piece, a 19th century Portuguese composition, sounded like a musical bridge between past and present. The musicians in Lisbon and the capital, united by technology and art, created a harmony that seemed to dance between continents. During the Symphony of the Jacarandas, something magical happened simultaneously in both cities. Purple petals began to fall, as if the trees themselves wanted to take part in the performance. Sophia, always attentive to significant details, captured the moment when a petal gently landed on Marina's guitar during her solo. The final piece, called Bridges, was a collaborative composition that blended local and Portuguese elements. Each student, with their own unique talents and characteristics, had a special moment to shine. Marco, the young Portuguese with cerebral palsy, performed a beautiful solo on the adapted piano, while Marina responded with her guitar from across the ocean. The audience in both cities watched in amazement. This was not just a concert. It was living proof that music had the power to transcend any limitation, be it physical or geographical. At the end of the performance, Clara and Marina led their orchestras in one last surprise. A special version of an old Portuguese song about longing, transformed into an anthem of hope and reunion. The voices of the choirs in both cities joined together, creating a moment of pure emotion that brought many to tears. Sophia, who documented everything, realized that she was recording more than a musical event. She was capturing the exact moment when a dream born in the streets took wings and flew over the ocean. After the final applause, Clara gathered her Portuguese students in a circle, as Marina did the same. Through the screens, the two groups could see each other, creating a single large virtual circle of music and friendship. "Do you know what I've learned in these months?" Clara said, her voice echoing across 2 continents. "That music is like a magnolia. Its roots may be in one place, but its flowers have the power to fly and sow beauty wherever they land. That evening, as the lights went out at the Lisbon Conservatory, Clara walked into the garden. Under a flowering magnolia tree, she hung a small plaque. On it was written in Portuguese and English, "Here also lives what is not lost. Here also dwells what cannot be lost." Across the ocean, in the garden of the Institute, Marina did the same, hanging an identical sign written in Portuguese and Fado, the jacaranda. Trees, both in Lisbon and in the capital, seemed to dance in the night breeze, their purple petals weaving a carpet of dreams realized under the moonlight. Clara's return was marked by a celebration that brought together past and future. The Instituto Harmonia Verde, now an international reference center for inclusive music, prepared a special reception that brought together all those who had been part of her journey. Mrs. Melia, wearing her new purple shawl, was the first to hug her at the airport. "See," the lady whispered with a knowing smile, "that torn blanket was just the beginning of your story." The Institute had changed in her absence, but in ways that warmed the heart. Marina, now coordinator of the youth music program, had expanded the project to 3 hospitals in the city. Her adapted guitar lessons were attracting students from all over the country, and her unique teaching method was beginning to gain recognition. "I learned from you," Marina told Clara during a rehearsal, "that our limitations are just invitations to find new paths." The success of the exchange with Portugal had inspired other initiatives. The Helena Rohan Fund, managed by Omar and Gail, received partnership proposals from several countries. Conservatories in Argentina, Chile, and Mexico were already planning similar exchange programs. Elisa, who had turned her chronicles into a new book titled Letters Among Jacarandas, was preparing for an international speaking tour on art and social transformation. Her stories about the Institute and Clara's journey were inspiring people around the world. Sophia, always attentive to the nuances of life, noticed a subtle change in Clara. Her experience in Portugal had added new layers to her music. There was now a maturity in her compositions that blended the hope of her home country with Portuguese depth. One special afternoon, while organizing her scores in the music room, Clara received an unexpected visitor. A young mother and her young daughter, who wore a similar orthopedic device to hers, were waiting timidly at the door. "Sorry to show up unannounced," her mother said, "but we traveled a long way to meet you. My daughter Laura saw your videos on the internet and, well, for the first time she believed she could be a musician." Laura, her eyes shining with wonder, held a small guitar. Clara smiled, remembering herself years ago, when music was just a distant dream born on the streets. "Do you want to play something for me?" Clara invited, sitting down at the piano. The girl, hesitant at first, began to pluck the strings. To everyone's surprise, it was a simplified version of the Jacaranda Symphony. Clara joined her at the piano, and soon Marina, who was passing by in the hallway, added her guitar to the improvised performance. The sound attracted other students and teachers. Within minutes, the music room was filled with people, each adding their voice or instrument to the spontaneous symphony. Sophia, who happened to be at the Institute documenting a new project, captured the magical moment with her camera. "That's how music should be," Clara explained later as she shared a hot chocolate with Laura and her mother, "like a garden where each flower has its own beauty, its own time to bloom." Gail, watching the scene from the door, smiled with emotion. He remembered the first time he saw Clara at the Continental Hotel, a brave teenager who would change his life forever. Now she had become a multiplier of dreams, helping others find their own music. Later that afternoon, Clara took Laura to the garden. Together they planted a new magnolia tree, a tradition the Institute maintained for each new student who arrived. As they tended the little tree, Clara told the girl about her grandmother Helena, about music that blooms in winter, about poetry that grows on the sidewalks. "You know, Laura," she said, helping the girl water the seedling, "each person has their own music inside them. Sometimes it comes as a grand symphony, sometimes as a simple melody. The important thing is to never stop believing that it exists." That night, after everyone had left, Clara sat under her favorite magnolia tree. She took out her old poetry notebook from her pocket, the same one she had carried when she was on the streets, now with pages yellowed by time but still full of dreams and hopes. Time passed, but the Instituto Harmonia Verde continued to flourish, multiplying new stories and transformations. The small initial garden became a true grove of jacarandas, each tree representing a life touched by music and art. Clara, now a recognized expert in inclusive music therapy, divided her time between teaching at the Institute, giving international lectures, and developing new methods of music education. Her work had inspired the creation of similar programs in several countries, forming a global network of music and inclusion. On a special spring morning, the Institute was preparing for a unique celebration, the graduation of the first class of the Inclusive Music Teacher Training Program. Among the graduates was Marina, who, in addition to her diploma, would receive special recognition for her pioneering work in hospitals. The auditorium of the Cultural Center, formerly the Rohan Mansion, was packed. In the front row, Elisa and Gail, now with silver hair, held hands like teenagers in love. Beside them, Omar, who had become a loving grandfather over the years, smiled proudly. Mrs. Melia, still active in the crafts project, wore a special shawl, embroidered with small jacaranda trees. Sophia, who had documented every important moment of the Institute over the years, was preparing to release a special documentary, Sinfonia dos Jacarandas, uma historia de amor e música. The film told not only the story of Clara and her family, but of all the lives that had been transformed by the power of art. The ceremony began with a special performance. Laura, the shy girl who had arrived years ago, dreaming of becoming a musician, now a talented violinist, would play her own composition. Her music spoke of overcoming limits, of finding beauty in differences, of jacarandas that bloom even on the most unlikely sidewalks. Clara watched it all with teary eyes, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She remembered her own journey, from the cold nights under awnings to the concert hall in Lisbon, from the torn blanket to the international stage, from the girl who limped alone through the streets to the woman who helped others find their own way. After the ceremony, everyone gathered in the garden for a special tradition. Each graduate would plant their own magnolia. Marina, upon planting her tree, surprised everyone with an announcement. The hospital where she worked had approved the creation of a therapeutic garden inspired by the Institute, where patients could recover amid music and flowers. As the sun set, turning the sky pink and purple, Clara gathered everyone in a large circle beneath the flowering trees. Together they sang the Jacaranda Symphony, but this time with a new final verse composed especially for the occasion. On the streets of life, between stone and concrete, there is always room for a dream to grow, like jacarandas that bloom. In winter, music teaches us to never give up on being. The purple petals danced in the air, creating a magical spectacle of light and color. Sophia, capturing the moment with her camera, realized that she was recording more than a celebration. She was documenting an everyday miracle, living proof that love, art, and hope can transform any barren land into a blooming garden. Clara, standing under her favorite magnolia tree, looked up at the sky through the flowering branches. She thought of her grandmother Helena, of her secret songs that now echoed throughout the world. She thought of her mother Elisa, whose words had built bridges between hearts. She thought of all the urban angels who had been part of her story. He took his old poetry notebook, now almost completely filled, out of his pocket and wrote one last entry. The magnolia does not ask where it will grow. It just finds cracks in the concrete and blooms. Music doesn't ask who can play, just find open hearts and grow. And we, gardeners of dreams, we continue planting hope, so that others may pick flowers in the winters to come. And so between music and poetry, between flowers and dreams come true, the history of the Instituto Harmonia Verde continued to be written, no longer just on the pages of a book or in the notes of a score, but in the heart of each person who learned that, like the jacarandas, it is possible to bloom in any season.